So I had a different video all queued up to release this morning, and then I came across the Sandy Munro interview with Elon Musk, and I was so blown away and so excited about it that I wanted to share it with everybody. So here we go. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So there are a whole bunch of different topics that Sandy and Elon cover. So I highly recommend watching the original video. I'll put the link in the description, of course, along with all the other stuff that you can check out. And make sure you check that out, and definitely make sure you check out the Patreon link and all of that other good stuff. But anyway, I want to touch on a few different topics. I've got my handy dandy back of the envelope here to make sure I got it. So I want to talk about EV crossover, when Sandy and Elon think it'll happen. I honestly think it's a little bit conservative in my mind. The other one is 48 versus 12 volt batteries. I think that's actually really huge. And then a whole bunch of things that relate to full self-driving and automated driving, and Sandy Munro completely geeking out about the fact that the full self-driving, he got a chance to drive with Tesla owners of Silicon Valley, and he was utterly blown away by the incredible full self-driving beta. And you got to remember, he's driving the normal version across country right now. So I think he was incredibly excited, and really his eyes were opened about the fact of how much better the beta version is. And he's very excited about everybody else getting it, as am I. Can't wait for that to happen. Can't wait. All right. Anyway, so here we go.
I had a lot of executives come in after I gave a speech and said, this was a couple of years ago now, and I said that the crossover point for electric over ICE is 2030. And basically that was because of tearing apart your car, the Model 3.
You mean a majority of your car? When you say crossover point, how are you defining that?
50% of the vehicles are going to be sold, are going to be, or more than 50%, are going to be pure EV, or they're going to be hybrid. And I
believe hybrid, like, no, for sure. I think it probably 10 years, it's probably majority EV.
Yeah, I truly believe that. But when I brought it out, I mean, the analysts, I don't want to get too far deep into that, but analysts were saying, maybe somewhere around 2045, there'll be about, 15% EVs and whatnot.
Sure.
And now we're looking at California with 8% right now and going higher.
Sure.
And then you've got Europe saying, forget it, you can't drive here if you've got a nice vehicle, on and on and on. So a lot of people were hoping that everything was going to stay the way it was, or basically go back to the good old days, as it were. I was not. I was in your camp. Like I say, when I got your car initially, and never really been, I didn't care one way or another. Car's a car. We take it apart, we look inside, we find out how much it costs and what the techniques and technologies are, and then we just move on.
Sure.
With yours, initially, I don't like this, I don't like that. Then I drove it because I was the last one to drive that vehicle. Mm-hmm. And he said, you should really take this thing for a ride, see what it. And I took it into a parking lot. There's a college that's near us. And I zipped around and whatnot, and I feel young again. I didn't expect that excitement.
All right, so quite a bit going on there, obviously. So it's interesting that Sandy Munro is not a fanboy traditionally, right? I think a lot of people nowadays think that Sandy Munro is just like a fanboy of Tesla and of Elon Musk. And he was incredibly critical. If you go back and look at his earlier stuff, even the build quality, and in fact, some of the interview in this particular interview, he really takes Elon Musk to task about some of the early Model 3. And actually, even the Model 3 that he currently has, that's a 2021, he's pissed off that he bought the version he did rather than one that's a month later. So he's not a fanboy, but you can hear how excited he was about driving a quality electric vehicle. And I've got to say, I felt the exact same thing when I first got behind the wheel of a Tesla, and I was like, holy mackerel, there's like, what am I going to do? I've got to find some amount of money that I can put into purchasing this vehicle, because I've got to have this thing. And, it's a major sacrifice, because I know it's a very expensive vehicle, but there's no question that an electric vehicle is just head and shoulders above anything else. And certainly if you're an acceleration junkie, I don't even have the performance model, and it's already super exciting. And I've kind of gotten used to it. And now when I drive the Mazda CX-5, it's just kind of pathetic how bad that is versus the Tesla. And so I just want to jump right back in the Tesla for a whole bunch of other reasons, but just because the electric car is so much fun. We'll get to the full self-driving stuff later, but it's really fascinating how he's so excited about that. I will say, however, I think that the EV crossover point, I think that they're a little bit conservative about that. I think that the EV crossover point is going to happen much, much sooner than they are giving credit for. I think it'll probably be, I mean, much sooner in the sense of like maybe a couple of years. So I think 2027, 2028, assuming that these companies can ramp up enough speed of production. That's the big thing. But if they do, I think it's going to happen that quickly.
We started looking at the electronics and how much better, even the wiring is in, well, even the wiring was...
We have a lot to improve on the wiring front. I think there's a lot more that can be done to improve wiring.
Yeah, well, right now...
Also, like 12 volts. I mean, what are we still doing with 12 volts?
42 is where everybody should be, but...
I think 48.
More 48, yeah. But at the end of the day, we need to do something. That'll reduce the wire diameters and stuff like that, and that's just nothing but cash in the bank.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of that as well. I think
with the new SX, we're finally transitioning to a lithium-ion 12 volt.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
That's an excellent idea. Smaller box.
It's got way more capacity, and the calendar and cycle life match that of the main pack.
Oh, cool.
So we should have done it before now, but it's great that we're doing it now. This is one of those inside baseball victories that's kind of a big deal.
All right, so this is something that nobody really cares or thinks about much at all, probably on a daily basis, but this is actually huge. So the first thing is that going from 12 volts to 48 volts is a higher voltage, so you can reduce the diameter of the wire. There's a couple things that happens with that. Number one, when you reduce the wire, you reduce the weight. And number two, when you reduce the diameter, when you increase the voltage and not up to some excessive amount like hundreds and hundreds of volts, which could be dangerous to a human being occupying it, you can transmit more data over that, because what he talks about is rather than having point-to-point wiring, he wants to dump everything onto a main bus.
We have a main bus B undervolt.
And having everything on a main bus allows it to all run at the same voltage, and then all of the data can be spread out to where it needs to go. So this is actually huge stuff. It's cost savings, it's weight savings, and it's more efficient, and it'll make the operating system work better. Of course, also you heard him talking about the lithium-ion battery that they're putting into the Tesla Model S and Model X, the new plaid versions. By the way, if you haven't looked yet on the merch store, there is a new, I don't even have it yet, but it's a Tesla logo in plaid, and I think it's the coolest thing ever. I've got one on order. I will definitely wear it as soon as I have a chance to. But anyway, if you have a chance to take a look at that, look in the description for that. You can find it. Go shop around. It's pretty darn cool looking. But anyway, back to the Model S and Model X. What he's saying is that he's putting a lithium-ion 12-volt battery in. So at least, even though it's a 12-volt battery, instead of being an old crappy lead-acid battery like everybody else has, they're going to have a lithium-ion battery like is in your phone. So in other words, he's saying that the cycle life, because the main batteries for the car are lithium ion, so that the charge cycling will end up being the same for the lithium ion battery as for the battery pack, which will be, years and years and years. The problem right now, of course, with the Tesla is just like any other car, it can go south. Like the battery, the 12-volt battery that runs everything else can die well before the lithium-ion battery packs. So if that happens, that's a really big problem. So that's the reason why the lithium-ion aspect is really important. I personally feel like they should definitely get to 48 volts as fast as humanly possible, but we will see how long that takes. All right, so now let's turn to a few clips that have to do with full self-driving and the software and the beta software and actually lines of code, which is yay. It actually, as Elon says, it's not really lines of code. It's more about the neural network models. But anyway, it's a very interesting discussion, super geeky, absolutely love it.
That's good stuff. But I have to tell you about the best stuff. And okay, so we had the beta autopilot system, and and we did have problems. Mm-hmm. But the problems weren't with your system; they were with the roads. People are painting. Either they don't paint in certain areas, or they paint right in the center. So how are we going to get legislation to make it so that things are consistent between states. In the old days, it probably didn't make much difference, but now we're moving into self-driving, and
well, I mean, frankly, I think for self-driving, even if the road is painted completely wrong, and a UFO lands in the middle of the road, the car still cannot crash and still needs to do the right thing. So, what really matters, like the prime directive for the autopilot system is don't crash. Like that really overrides everything. So no matter what the lines say or how the road is done, the thing that needs to happen is minimizing the probability of impact while getting you to your destination conveniently and comfortably. But the prime directive, absolute priority is minimize probability of injury to yourself or to anyone on the road, on the pedestrians or anything like that. So, and it's really, it can't be dependent on the road markings being correct or anything like that. It's just got to be, no matter what, it's not going to crash.
Corey and I had an issue, and luckily I got out of it. But what happened was they painted all kinds of lines all over the place. There was an old off-ramp and a new off-ramp and a bunch of cones and some flashing red lights. It was totally, I have no idea. If I had to take that thing and knew I had to take it, I would be totally confused as to what to do where. But when the car came into it, the lines are telling it, okay, go here. And that scared the living daylights out of me. If we would have crashed, if it would have been somebody, I used to race, and I kind of like can get out of stuff, and even though I'm old, I'm kind of agile. But if we would have crashed, the press would have instantly said it was all your fault. I'm guaranteeing you somebody is going to screw up somewhere, and people have to know it's the road that can bugger the things up as well as whether your autopilot thing.
I mean, it would certainly be helpful to have roads with accurate markings and everything. But like I said, really for self-driving, it's got to be, even if somebody tries to trick the car, they do not succeed in tricking the car.
Right.
Because people will do weird things. So it's got to be maintain safety no matter what, and don't let yourself get tricked.
So there's a bit to unpack there. So what Sandy Munro is talking about, I assume, is during his cross-country trip, which they are, they've done a whole series of videos about that. They've had issues, and clearly there are places where people do construction work and they create these horrible situations. And I was actually in a situation that was like that recently on I-16 and 75 in Macon, Georgia. And there's construction that's been going on for ages. It was a rainy evening. It was actually one of the first, I think it was our first road trip, actually. I don't have this on video. I wish I did. But we got off of our charging point and we got onto the road, and 16 did some absolutely crazy thing with pylons and barrels and everything. And it was raining and it was dark and it was impossible to tell where the road was going. I was very fortunate that there were other cars that were driving in front of me and I just kind of followed them. But I literally had no idea where the road was and where it wasn't. And so it's important what Sandy is talking about is we need to fix the infrastructure to make that better. What Elon Musk is saying, on the other hand, and I think this is the really important point, is it doesn't matter. He's saying no matter what happens, even if the road just kind of suddenly disappears, even if a UFO lands in the middle of the road, the car has got to be safe. At a very minimum level, it's got to not crash, it's got to pull over to the side, it's got to stop, it's got to do something. He talks about how it's really important to protect pedestrians and other people, like on cycles, bicycles or motorcycles or whatever. So other people on the road as well, but that it's absolutely massively important that they protect everyone and that the car itself stops at the very, very least and does not crash. So like you said, it's the prime directive. I kind of love the Star Trek reference.
I'd say that's slightly more important than the prime directive. Wouldn't you, Jim?
It's a very interesting proposition. Let me think about it.
So anyway, all of that is super cool, but I love the difference, that Sandy Munro is like, society's got to fix this, and Elon's like, no, we've got to fix this. That's what matters.
He gave us a ride, okay? And we taped it. And you can hear me going, my voice went up about 3 octaves. I was so excited. Corey said he's got a sore ear from me giggling or whatever. I've sat in in F-18s. I didn't fly them, but I was sat in them, and I saw how everything was supposed to work on the ground.
Yeah.
I flew, or through a simulator, I flew a C-17. I know what you can do and what you can't do, what autopilot will cut it. And I never seen anything, never, ever seen anything quite like what you've got in the new self-driving thing. This is just absolutely brilliant. This should get into the marketplace as fast as possible. It's accurate. It's much more accurate than what we have in the Model 3. It's accurate. It's kind of aggressive because if there's a hole, it'll find that hole. It makes left-hand turns, which I've heard from everybody can't be done. I mean, these are the things that this will save more lives than airbags, seat belts, and anything else that anybody's ever gotten. Because
I think that's correct. It will.
Yeah. I was so impressed. I couldn't believe it. And I have some videotape, and I just asked you for using it. I want to put that out. I want the rest of the world to know what the new standard is.
All right, so you can tell Sandy Munro is not very impressed by the full self-driving beta, right? He looks like a little kid even talking about it. It gets me so excited about the fact that someday I will get this too. In fact, my son and I, if anybody from Tesla is listening, my son and I are thinking about doing a trip out to Los Angeles in a couple of weeks. And how cool would it be to video each one of the legs of that with the full self-driving beta? We would be putting, I don't know, somewhere around 4,600 miles on the car in a couple of weeks, back and forth. So yeah. So if anybody in Tesla is listening, I really would love to have the beta software before we go on that road trip if we decide to do it. But anyway, you can see how excited Sandy is. You can see that Elon Musk is excited about that. He's very excited about the fact that he is able to provide this for people, and that people are, finding this of value. And I think that's really amazing. He actually gets emotional at one point about the fact that it's going to save lives. I think that's actually super important. And it's really important to understand just how much he cares about that personally. He's saying it like Sandy's like, this has to get out to the public as fast as possible. And Elon agrees with that, right? He's saying we have to do this in a very careful, staged way, but it does need to get out to the public. And so I think it's really critical that we understand just how big of a jump this is. I think a lot of people who are driving other car manufacturers, driver assist packages, or even Tesla's like I am, Tesla's like current beta version, whatever that would be called, but not the new beta version, that, we're like, yeah, it's okay. And it works all right. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But it sounds like this new version is much, much, much more human. So anyway, what Tesla's got going for it, of course, is not only being an EV car, but also being an autonomously driving car. So you get the best of both worlds. If you want to drive right now, you can have some fun and really punch it. And hopefully when this beta rolls out to more of us, then it will be something where if you're going on a long trip or even on your daily commute, you really can relax and you don't have to worry about that. And if you happen to have caught my last episode that I did about all the little tech in the S and X, there's also that active noise canceling. So if you think about it, if you have active noise canceling and you have this driver assist feature, which actually can drive on its own for the most part, you can be pretty chill. So if you have like a nasty, ugly 25, 30, 40-minute commute back and forth on big roads and stuff, instead of being stressed out when you get to work or when you get home, you can be relaxed and you can just enjoy yourself, and it will be a much better environment, and it won't be so noisy either, at least if you're driving in that Model S and X, I suppose.
That system, I don't know who you developed or how it developed, but that is absolutely
it was developed
stunning.
internally. Like, we developed the hardware and the software. We've got a very talented team that we built from scratch at Tesla for Autopilot software and Autopilot hardware. We've got really a lot of talented people.
I got to ask a technical question. How many lines of code is in that thing? A bazillion? A trillion? What?
Well, I don't think lines of code is necessarily a metric of goodness.
Well, it may be, but I mean, it's so intuitive. Either that, or it's AI and it's cognitive knowledge or something. I don't know, but
yeah, I think generally I would consider lines of code to be like a large number of lines of code to be bad, not good. And in fact, I would generally give like 2 points for deleting a line of code, 1 point for adding a line of code. And then the lines of code thing, when you have neural nets where you've
right, I got it.
It's not. there's a whole lot of statistics going on, basically, a lot of dot products going on. The lines of code becomes especially not a figure of merit for when you've got a lot of complex neural nets operating. You have a lot of matrix math. I mean, that said, I think we haven't actually counted it, but I mean, it's maybe, I don't know, a few 100,000 lines of code.
Really?
Like
a few 100,000? That's amazing.
I would like it to be less,
Well, your philosophy about getting rid of lines of code, I have a philosophy about getting rid of parts.
All right, so a lot to unpack there. First of all, Sandy Munro is, and this is nothing to blame for him, but he's more of the, he's ignorant of exactly what goes into a neural net. And honestly, it's more like when we talk about like Andrej Karpathy, and he talked about all of the hardware the software 1.0 and how software 2.0 is eating it. And you can check out some videos I did up there on that, and embedded chips, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, we kind of know about this because we've had a lot of videos and we've shared about this sort of thing, but the general public doesn't really understand the difference between hard coding and a neural net. And so Elon was gently explaining that to him. So Sandy was stuck on this idea of lines of code. And to put this in perspective, I'm trying to remember, but I believe that like the Mac operating system, for example, I just happen to know this offhand, is somewhere in the order of 10 million lines of code. So 300,000 or 400,000 lines of code sounds really big until you think about how freaking big. Like the thing that is running my computer right now is in the order of 10 million lines of code. So we're talking about an order of magnitude less, or 2 orders of magnitude less than an operating system. And this is something that's driving your car. So that's really impressive. But of more import, it's really not the lines of code so much, it's how big your neural net model is and how quickly it can run. And I'm going to do an episode, which I was planning on doing today, but it's going to delay just a little bit, about that. But it looks like hardware 3 may actually be able to run the code. And that's an amazing thing. I didn't think that was going to be possible, but it appears that the models, the neural net models, are efficient enough to do that. So you heard about Elon Musk talking about statistics, about dot products, about the neural nets and everything. All of that is, if we go and look at those neural processing units that are on the inference engine chips or the new Apple M1 chip, etc., those neural net processing units are specifically designed to do very fast matrix math, or dot products, or cross products, or something like that. But generally it's dot products. So it basically just means that they multiply and add super, super fast. That's exactly what they're designed to do. And for these things, they're done at a relatively low bit width so that they can process even faster because they don't need quite as much accuracy to drive. So all of this stuff Elon was kind of pointing out to Sandy Munro without getting into the weeds about it. But essentially he's talking about the fact that Andrej Karpathy, who's the lead, and his team are a bunch of absolutely brilliant AI like researchers, I guess engineers at this point. I don't know what the right word for it is, scientists, but I guess engineers, since they're actually making a practical solution. But anyway, they are working with massive, massive statistics. That's basically what they're doing, is they're working on statistics, and they're crunching these numbers down, and they're doing all of this matrix math in order to create a neural network model with millions or probably billions of little weights that are all adjusted to various different things, so that if it sees a red octagon in the distance, it knows that that's a stop sign, even if it's at night, or even if it's, crappy weather or something like that. Or if it sees a dashed line on the road, it knows that's a dashed line, and so it's supposed to stay here. So all of that stuff, very, very complicated, but each of those little weights that's dealing with that is dealing with all those individual features. I actually know that I owe all of you one more episode in my trilogy on neural nets, and that is all about deep neural nets. But in the meantime, if you want to, you can watch the first couple up here, and it will explain how neural nets are built and how convolution works and everything. But anyway, I think it's absolutely fascinating how even very intelligent people who are not kind of in the know don't understand how neural networks work and how different they are from traditional coding. And I think that's really fascinating. But also I think it's fascinating how much Sandy and Elon both agree. You know, the best part is no part, and Elon is all about the best code is no code, basically, right? So he's like, if we can reduce the code and reduce the code and reduce the parts and reduce the parts. During a lot of the rest of this interview, they talk at length about seats and about specific parts of cars and about resins and about filling gaps and everything, and all sorts of things about production and how to make production better. And by the way, Sandy points out that he feels that the Tesla Model 3 seats that he is in, that he's been riding around in, he says they are by far the most comfortable seats that he has ever ridden long distance in. And he's, you know, Mercedes, BMW, lots of other cars. So I think that's amazing, because a lot of people think like, oh, Tesla isn't really luxury. But where it counts, the thing that your butt sits on and that your back leans against, that matters. And, you know, he was saying how important the quality of those seats were and how comfortable it was for him to sit for a long period of time. And, you know, he's a little bit older like I am, so I can see how that matters more. You know, I think when you're 20 years old, you know, you can sleep on the floor kind of thing, right? When you get older, you like a nice, soft, carefully crafted mattress to lay on. So he would definitely know from having, you know, a crappy seat to having a good seat. Although he says his basic car is a Jeep Wrangler, and I have to say that Jeep Wranglers do not have the most comfortable seats in the world. So his bar may be a little bit low. All right, so all told, that was maybe 4 or 5 minutes of this entire interview, which is almost 50 minutes long. Again, I highly recommend watching it. It's super, super entertaining. The two of these guys are so smart, and they really riff off of each other very well. So I highly recommend watching it, and also subscribing to Munro Live if you haven't. It's a really worthy channel to pay attention to. Alrighty, I hope you found this episode fun and informative. I certainly found it fun to watch these video clips and react to them. If you did, please do like and subscribe so other people can find it, because that's how YouTube works. And definitely ask me questions in the comments or at my email address, which is DrKnowItAllKnows@gmail.com. Till next time, bye-bye.